Commander Zexhai stood on the bridge of his warship and looked at the data screen. The information about the new planet called Earth glowed in front of him. His sharp teeth showed in what his species called a hunting smile. "Another easy conquest," he said to his second-in-command. "These humans will fall, just like all the others." The Veltar had conquered 47 worlds in the past century. They were the greatest hunters in the galaxy. Their ships were fast and deadly. Their weapons could cut through any defense. Most importantly, they knew how to make other species afraid. Fear was the best weapon of all. Zexhai studied the human data again. The reports from their spy drones painted a clear picture. Earth had no energy shields around their planet. Their weapons still used chemical explosives and metal projectiles, ancient technology that belonged in a museum. The humans were split into hundreds of small groups that fought each other constantly. They had never united against a common enemy. "Look at this," Zexhai pointed at the screen. "They still use something called nuclear weapons. Crude devices that poison their own world. What kind of species destroys its own home?" His bridge crew laughed. The sound was like metal scraping against stone. In all their conquests, the Veltar had never met a species so primitive, yet so self-destructive. "Their largest ships are smaller than our scout vessels," reported the weapons officer. "Their armor is made from simple metals. Our plasma cannons will cut through them like they are made of paper." Zexhai nodded. The pattern was always the same. The Veltar would arrive with their massive fleet. The enemy would see their superior technology and surrender quickly. Sometimes there would be a brief fight, but it never lasted long. Fear would take hold, and the conquest would be complete. "How long do you estimate the campaign will take?" asked his second-in-command. 3 days, Zexhai said without hesitation. "Maybe less if they are smart enough to surrender immediately." The fleet moved through space toward the Sol system. 50 warships, each one capable of destroying a city from orbit. Behind them came the occupation forces and the equipment needed to strip Earth of its resources. It was a routine operation. As they traveled, Zexhai reviewed the tactical data. Earth had several billion inhabitants spread across their continents. They had primitive space stations and a few small colonies on nearby planets. Their military forces were divided between their competing nations. No central command structure existed. "Sir, we are receiving transmissions from the human homeworld," the communications officer announced. "Put it on the main screen," Zexhai ordered. A human face appeared on the display. The creature looked soft and weak compared to a Veltar warrior. Its skin was pale and smooth, without any natural armor. Its teeth were small and blunt, no claws or spines visible anywhere. "This is Secretary General Martinez of the United Nations," the human said. "We know you are approaching our system. We wish to open diplomatic communications. Perhaps we can find a peaceful solution that benefits both our peoples." The bridge crew erupted in laughter again. Zexhai let them enjoy the moment before raising his hand for silence. "Send a standard response," he ordered. "Tell them they have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally. After that, we will demonstrate the price of resistance." The communications officer nodded and sent the message. More transmissions came from Earth over the next several hours. Pleas for negotiation, offers of trade agreements, requests for more time to consider the surrender terms. All typical responses from prey species. But something felt different to Zexhai, though he could not identify what it was. "Sir, our long-range sensors are detecting unusual activity in the outer system," the sensor operator reported. "What kind of activity?" Zexhai asked. "The humans appear to be moving their fleet assets, but not in the way we expected." Zexhai frowned. Usually, primitive species would gather all their ships together for one desperate last stand. It was stupid but predictable. The sight of their entire fleet being destroyed at once would break the will of their people quickly. "Show me their fleet movements," he commanded. The tactical display showed the positions of human ships throughout their solar system, but instead of grouping together, they seemed to be spreading out. Ships were moving toward asteroid belts, behind planets, even toward the outer edges of the system. "Are they running away?" asked the weapons officer. No, Zexhai said slowly. If they were fleeing, they would be heading away from the system entirely. This is something else. He had never seen this pattern before. In all his conquests, prey species either gathered to fight or scattered to flee. They did not spread out and hide while staying in the same area. Perhaps they are trying to protect their civilian populations, suggested his second-in-command. Possible, Zexhai agreed. But something still felt wrong. As the Veltar fleet approached the inner system, more strange reports came in. Human mining operations on their moon had gone dark. Space stations that had been broadcasting civilian traffic were now silent. Even their communications to the approaching fleet had stopped. Sir, they have stopped responding to our transmissions entirely, the communications officer reported. Zexhai considered this. Complete radio silence was unusual. Most species kept talking right up until the moment of surrender, either begging for mercy or making threats they could not carry out. Send scout ships ahead, he ordered. I want detailed information on their defensive positions. Yes, sir. Should they engage any resistance they encounter? Of course. Make examples of any ships that refuse to surrender. Fear must be established early. The scout ships launched from the main fleet and accelerated toward Earth's moon. Zexhai watched their progress on the tactical display. Soon they would have clear intelligence about human capabilities. Then the real assault could begin. He felt the familiar excitement that came before a conquest. Another species would learn to fear the Veltar. Another world would join their growing empire. It would be over so quickly that the humans would barely have time to understand what was happening to them. Zexhai had no way of knowing that his understanding of warfare was about to change forever. He could not imagine that within hours he would experience something no Veltar had ever felt before. Something that would shake his faith in everything he believed about strength and weakness, predator and prey. The feeling humans called fear was waiting for him in the darkness between the worlds. Lieutenant Kethvar checked his weapons systems one final time. His scout squadron of 12 ships moved through space toward Earth's moon. Their mission was simple: destroy any defensive positions and gather intelligence on human military capabilities. All units, maintain formation, he transmitted to his pilots. Remember, we are dealing with primitives, quick, clean strikes. Show them the power of the Veltar. His squadron was equipped with the latest plasma weapons and energy shields. Each ship could destroy a human city block with a single shot. Against the crude kinetic weapons in the intelligence reports, they would be untouchable. Sir, I am detecting structures on the moon's surface, reported his sensor operator. They appear to be mining facilities. Perfect, Kethvar said. We will make an example of them. The humans on Earth will see their moon burning and know that resistance is hopeless. The lunar surface grew larger on his screens. He could see the geometric shapes of human constructions scattered across the gray landscape. Domes, towers, and what looked like launch platforms, all built with the simple materials that primitive species used. No energy readings from the installations, his wingmen reported. They appear to be abandoned. Kethvar felt a moment of disappointment. He had hoped for at least some resistance to make the demonstration more impressive, but perhaps the humans had fled when they detected the approaching Veltar fleet. Beginning attack run, he announced. Target the largest facility first. His squadron dove toward the moon's surface. Their plasma cannons began charging, ready to turn the human structures into molten metal and glass. The formation was perfect. Their approach angle optimal for maximum destruction. Then the universe exploded around them. Something invisible struck Kethvar's wingman and tore his ship apart in a shower of metal fragments. The explosion was so sudden and complete that there was no time for a distress call. One moment the ship was there, the next it was expanding debris. Contact, Kethvar shouted. We are under attack. But he could see no enemy ships, no energy signatures. Nothing but empty space and the gray moon below. Another pilot screamed over the communications channel as his ship suddenly broke in half. Again, there was no visible weapon. No energy beam or missile trail. Just instant, devastating destruction. Evasive maneuvers, Kethvar ordered. All ships scatter. His remaining pilots broke formation and began random flight patterns. It was the standard response to ambush attacks. But the killing continued. Ships died, one by one, torn apart by some invisible force. "Sir, I am detecting high-velocity projectiles," his sensor operator said, voice tight with fear. "They are moving at significant fractions of light speed." Kethvar felt his blood chill. Kinetic weapons moving that fast required enormous amounts of energy. The intelligence reports had said nothing about human railgun technology approaching relativistic speeds. "Where are they coming from?" he demanded. "I cannot determine the source. The projectiles are too fast for our sensors to track back to their origin." Another ship died, its hull crushed by the impact of whatever was hitting them. Kethvar began to understand the terrible truth. The humans had built their weapons into the moon itself. Hidden launchers scattered across the surface, camouflaged to look like mining equipment. "Pull back," he ordered. "All ships retreat to safe distance." But it was too late for most of his squadron. Ship after ship was picked off by the invisible killers. The remaining pilots tried to return fire, but their plasma bolts struck empty lunar surface. They could not target what they could not see. Kethvar's own ship shuddered as something massive struck his rear armor. Alarms filled the cockpit. His engines were failing, his weapons offline. Through his view screen, he watched the last of his wingmen die in a ball of fire. "This is impossible," he whispered. "They are primitives. How can they be doing this?" His damaged ship limped away from the moon, leaking atmosphere and spinning slowly. Behind him, the human installations remained silent and dark. No victory messages, no taunts, just patient, deadly efficiency. Of his 12 ships, only 3 survived to reach the outer system. The others had been destroyed in less than 10 minutes by an enemy they never saw. It was not a battle. It was an execution. "Sir, Commander Zexhai is requesting your report," his communications officer said. Kethvar stared at the tactical display, showing the positions where his pilots had died. How could he explain this to his commander? How could he describe weapons that killed from impossible distances? How could he make the fleet understand that everything they knew about warfare had just become useless? "Tell the commander we encountered unexpected resistance," he said finally. "Human capabilities are far beyond intelligence estimates. Should I request medical evacuation ships?" "No," Kethvar said. "Tell him to prepare for a real war." As his crippled ship drifted toward the main fleet, Kethvar tried to understand what had happened. The humans had not fought like any species in Veltar records. There had been no fleet engagement, no ship-to-ship combat, no opportunity for single combat between warriors. Instead, they had turned their entire moon into a weapon. They had waited in silence while the Veltar approached, then killed with mechanical precision. No anger, no battle cries, just calculated murder from hidden positions. The thought that terrified him most was simple. If the humans could do this to their moon, what had they done to their planet? "Sir, we are receiving a transmission," his communications officer announced. "From the fleet?" Kethvar asked. "No, sir. From the lunar surface." Kethvar felt his heart skip a beat. "Put it through." The voice that came over the speakers was calm and professional. Human, definitely. But not what he expected from a warrior species. "Veltar vessels, this is Luna Defense Command. You have entered restricted space and fired upon civilian mining installations. Withdraw immediately or face additional defensive measures." The transmission ended. Kethvar stared at his speakers in confusion. Civilian mining installations? The humans were claiming their weapons platforms were civilian targets? "Sir, what should we respond?" asked his communications officer. "Nothing," Kethvar said. "Say nothing at all." He had finally understood something about humans that the intelligence reports had missed completely. They did not see warfare the way other species did. To the Veltar, combat was about honor and dominance. To humans, it was apparently just another problem to be solved, and they had solved it very efficiently. His ship continued its slow journey back to the fleet, carrying news that would change everything the Veltar thought they knew about conquest. Behind him, the moon waited in patient silence, its weapons ready for the next ships that dared approach. Kethvar wondered if any of them would survive what was coming next. Commander HFY stared at the remains of Lieutenant Kethvar's ship as it docked with the fleet. 3 ships out of 12 had returned. The lieutenant himself was wounded, his confidence completely shattered. "Tell me again what happened," HFY demanded. Kethvar stood in the medical bay, his arm in a regeneration sleeve. "They turned their moon into a fortress, sir. Weapons hidden everywhere. We never saw them coming. Impossible. Our intelligence shows they have primitive technology. Our intelligence is wrong," Kethvar said quietly. "They hit us with kinetic rounds moving at near light speed, from positions we could not detect. My entire squadron was destroyed in minutes." HFY felt anger building in his chest. No primitive species had ever inflicted such losses on Veltar forces. It was unthinkable. "Then we will show them real power," he growled. "Prepare the full fleet for assault. We will burn their world from orbit and end this quickly." But as the massive Veltar fleet moved toward Earth, HFY could not shake the feeling that something was very wrong. The human planet hung in space ahead of them. Blue and white and beautiful, it looked peaceful. Too peaceful. "Sir, sensors are detecting multiple contacts throughout the system," reported his sensor officer. "Show me." The tactical display filled with red dots. Ships were emerging from behind asteroids, from the shadow of planets, from places where nothing should have been hiding. Hundreds of them, all moving toward the Veltar fleet. "How many?" HFY asked. "Still counting, sir. At least 300 vessels, possibly more." HFY studied the display in disbelief. The intelligence reports had said humans possessed fewer than 50 military ships. Where had this fleet come from? "Sir, some of those vessels appear to be civilian craft," the tactical officer reported. "Cargo haulers, mining ships, even passenger transports. They are throwing everything they have at us," HFY said. "Good. We will destroy them all at once and end their resistance." But as the human fleet approached, HFY began to notice disturbing patterns. The ships were not attacking in formation. Instead, they came from all directions at once. Some moved in groups, others alone. There was no central strategy he could identify. "Target the largest ships first," he ordered. "Show them our superiority." The Veltar fleet opened fire. Plasma cannons and particle beams lanced out across space. Several human ships exploded immediately, their primitive hulls no match for advanced energy weapons. But the human fleet did not retreat. Ships that should have been destroyed continued fighting. Vessels with their engines blown off still fired their weapons. Craft that were burning and falling apart kept coming. "Sir, that human destroyer just rammed one of our frigates," the tactical officer reported, voice filled with shock. HFY watched in horror as the human ship, its hull breached and leaking atmosphere, crashed into a Veltar vessel at full speed. Both ships were destroyed in the explosion. "Why would they do that?" he whispered. Their ship was already dead. More human vessels began similar attacks. Ships that could have retreated instead threw themselves at Veltar warships like guided missiles. It made no tactical sense. A damaged ship should withdraw to fight another day, not waste itself in meaningless sacrifice. "Sir, we are receiving multiple distress calls from our outer ships," the communications officer announced. "Put them through." The bridge filled with panicked voices from across the fleet. Human ships were appearing everywhere, striking at weak points, hitting supply vessels and support craft. But worst of all were the reports of human crews refusing to surrender even when their ships were completely disabled. "They will not stop fighting," one captain reported. "We have destroyed their weapons, their engines, their life support. But they keep coming. They are using emergency thrusters to ram our hull." Another voice cut in. "We have boarded one of their vessels. The crew is fighting us in the corridors with handheld weapons. They know they cannot win, but they will not surrender." HFY felt something cold growing in his stomach. In all his conquests, enemy crews had surrendered when their ships were disabled. It was logical. Smart. Why die pointlessly when defeat was certain? "Sir, the human flagship is transmitting," his communications officer announced. "Let me hear it." A human voice filled the bridge, male, calm, With an accent Zexhai could not identify. Veltar Fleet. This is Admiral Chen of the Terran Defense Force. You came here expecting easy prey. You thought we would cower and submit like the other species you have conquered. You were wrong. The transmission continued as explosions lit up space around them. We are not fighting for territory or resources. We are fighting for the right to exist. And we will never stop. Every ship you destroy costs you 3 of your own. Every system you attack will bleed you until nothing remains. This is our home. You are not welcome here. The communication ended. Zexhai stared at his tactical display as more Veltar ships died. The humans were losing twice as many vessels. But they kept coming. It was like fighting an enemy that felt no pain. Sir, should we withdraw to regroup? Asked his second-in-command. No, Zexhai snapped. We are Veltar. We do not retreat from primitives. But even as he said the words, doubt crept into his mind. His fleet was taking losses he had never experienced before. Not because human technology was superior, but because human psychology was completely alien. A damaged human corvette drifted past his flagship's view screen. Its hull was cracked open, atmosphere streaming out into space. Through the breach, Zexhai could see human crew members in emergency suits, still manning their weapon stations. They fired one final salvo before their ship broke apart completely. That image would haunt him for the rest of his life, beings choosing to die at their posts rather than accept defeat. It was not courage as the Veltar understood it. It was something else entirely. Sir, enemy reinforcements approaching from Earth, the sensor officer reported. Zexhai looked at the display and felt his blood freeze. More ships were rising from the planet below. But these were not military vessels. They were civilian craft, hastily armed and armored. Cargo ships with weapons welded to their hulls. Passenger liners bristling with missile pods. They are sending their children to die, he whispered. But as he watched the approaching ships, Zexhai realized something that made his hands shake. The humans were not sending their children to die. They were sending everyone to fight. Old and young, military and civilian, all united in their refusal to surrender. A species that would rather extinct itself than submit was beyond his understanding. And for the first time in his long military career, Commander Zexhai began to feel afraid. Admiral Thexmori read Commander Zexhai's emergency transmission for the 3rd time. The words made no sense. A primitive species could not inflict such casualties on a Veltar fleet. There had to be some mistake. Sir, we are receiving similar reports from other sectors, his intelligence officer announced. Human ships have been detected in 3 different star systems. Impossible, Thexmori said. Humans do not have faster-than-light travel. Our scouts confirmed this. Yes, sir. But the reports are verified. Human vessels are operating in Veltar space, using what appears to be our own FTL technology. Thexmori stood from his command chair and walked to the tactical display. Red markers showed Veltar positions throughout their border regions. New symbols appeared as he watched. Unknown contacts moving through space where no human ships should exist. How could they have developed FTL drive so quickly? Unknown, sir. But our engineering teams believe they may have salvaged technology from damaged ships in the Sol system. Salvaged and reverse-engineered functioning FTL drives in a matter of weeks? Thexmori shook his head. Even our best scientists would need months for such work. A new alarm sounded across the bridge. The communications officer looked up from his station with wide eyes. Sir, Outpost 7 is under attack. They report human vessels approaching their position. Send the defense fleet, Thexmori ordered. Sir, the defense fleet is already engaged. They report the human ships are different. Different how? The vessels appear to be designed around single massive weapons. They attack at full speed, fire once with devastating effect, then self-destruct to avoid capture. Thexmori felt a chill run through his body. Self-destruct? You mean they retreat? No, sir. They literally detonate their own ships to prevent us from studying their technology. The pilots die in the explosions. This made no sense at all. Why would any species waste trained pilots and expensive ships in such pointless attacks? The tactical value was minimal compared to the cost. "Sir, incoming transmission from Outpost 7, the communications officer announced. Emergency priority. Put it through." The voice that came over the speakers was strained and filled with static. "This is Commander Vel Knox at Outpost 7. We are under heavy attack by human forces. They have some kind of new weapon. Sir, they are not trying to capture the base. They are trying to destroy everything." An explosion echoed through the transmission before it cut off completely. "Re-establish contact," Thexmori ordered. "I cannot, sir. The outpost is no longer responding." Thexmori stared at the tactical display as the marker for Outpost 7 changed from blue to red, then disappeared entirely. An entire Veltar military installation had been wiped out in minutes. "Sir, we have refugee ships approaching from the border regions," the sensor operator reported. "Put them on screen." The main display showed a ragged line of Veltar vessels limping through space. Civilian transports, cargo haulers, and damaged military ships, all fleeing toward the safety of the inner systems. "Open a channel to the lead ship," Thexmori commanded. A Veltar civilian appeared on the screen. His face was marked with burns, his clothing torn. "This is Captain Moore, then, of the transport vessel Safe Harbor. We are evacuating from the Kethvar system. The humans came 3 days ago." "On is on." "What happened?" Thexmori asked. "They did not demand surrender. They did not try to capture our facilities. They just started destroying everything. Our defense platforms, our orbital stations, our mining operations, everything." "Did they land troops on the planet?" "No, sir. They did not want the planet. They only wanted to make sure we could never use it again." The transmission ended as the refugee ship continued toward safety. Thexmori turned to his staff officers, all of whom looked as confused as he felt. "Analysis?" he requested. "Sir, the humans appear to be conducting what they call a scorched earth strategy," the tactical officer reported. "They are not trying to conquer our territory. They are trying to deny it to us permanently. That makes no strategic sense. Empty systems have no value. Unless," the intelligence officer said quietly, "their goal is not conquest, but extinction." The bridge fell silent. In all of Veltar history, wars had been fought for territory, resources, or dominance. Never had they encountered a species that fought simply to destroy their enemies completely. "Sir, long-range sensors are detecting a large human fleet approaching the Dex High system," the sensor operator announced. Thexmori looked at the tactical display. Dex High was one of their major industrial worlds, heavily defended and far from the front lines. "How many ships?" "Difficult to determine, sir. The human vessels appear to be using some kind of stealth technology. We can only detect them when they are very close. Send the third fleet to intercept." "Sir, the third fleet is already en route. But they report the human ships are not behaving like any fleet they have encountered before." "Explain." "The human vessels split up as they approach targets. Some attack the defense platforms, others go after industrial facilities. Still others target civilian populations. They coordinate perfectly but operate independently." Thexmori tried to understand this new form of warfare. Veltar fleets fought as unified forces under central command. The idea of individual ships operating alone while maintaining coordination was alien to their military doctrine. "Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet approaching Dex High," the communications officer announced. "Let me hear it." The voice that came over the speakers was different from the previous human transmissions. This one was cold and mechanical, as if delivered by a computer. "Veltar forces, this is the Terran Expeditionary Fleet. We are not here to negotiate. We are not here to conquer. We are here to ensure that your species never again threatens any peaceful civilization. Withdraw your forces from all occupied worlds within 72 hours or face total destruction." The transmission ended. Thexmori stared at his officers in shock. "They are demanding we abandon our empire," he said. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his second-in-command. Thexmori looked at the tactical display showing human forces advancing throughout Veltar space. For the first time, in his long military career, He was facing an enemy that did not want anything from them except their complete destruction. "Prepare all available fleets for defense of the home system," he ordered. "And send a message to the High Council. Tell them we may have found our first truly dangerous enemy." As his staff officers hurried to carry out his orders, Vex Mori remained staring at the tactical display. Red markers continued to appear as more human forces were detected. They were spreading like a plague throughout Veltar space, destroying everything they touched. The most terrifying part was not their technology or their tactics. It was their complete lack of interest in anything except the total elimination of Veltar civilization. They fought like a species that had already accepted their own extinction and simply wanted to take their enemies with them. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Veltar were prey. Zexhai sat in the refugee camp on Veltar Prime and tried to forget the sound of human laughter. It had been 6 months since the fall of his homeworld, but the memory still woke him from sleep. Around him, thousands of other Veltar survivors lived in temporary shelters. Former commanders, proud warriors, elite pilots, all reduced to refugees by an enemy they had thought primitive. The shame was almost unbearable. He opened the datapad containing his memoir and continued writing. Someone needed to record what had happened. Someone needed to warn other species about humanity. But as the words appeared on the screen, Zexhai realized he was struggling to explain something that defied explanation. "How do you describe a species that treats death as a friend?" he wrote. "How do you explain warriors who laugh while dying?" The final battle for Veltar Prime haunted his dreams. Human ships had appeared throughout the home system like ghosts materializing from empty space. Not the massive fleets that Veltar doctrine expected, but small groups of vessels that struck without warning and disappeared before retaliation could be organized. But the worst moment had come during the boarding of his flagship. Zexhai had watched through security cameras as human marines fought through the corridors of his ship. There were only 12 of them against 300 Veltar crew members. By all logic, they should have been overwhelmed quickly. Instead, they moved through the ship like they had been born for this moment. When one human was wounded, the others covered him while he treated his own injuries. When their ammunition ran low, they used Veltar weapons with disturbing efficiency. When cornered with no way out, they smiled. That was what broke Zexhai's understanding of warfare. The humans smiled. "Sir, we have them trapped," his security chief had reported. 10 humans cornered in the engine room. "They have no way out. Demand their surrender," Zexhai had ordered. "I did, sir." They responded by singing something they called a drinking song. Zexhai had watched in confusion as the trapped humans sat in a circle, sharing water from their emergency supplies and singing in their strange language. They knew they were going to die. They accepted it completely, and they turned their last moments into something resembling a celebration. When the final assault came, the humans fought with incredible coordination. They moved like they could read each other's minds, covering weaknesses and supporting strengths with perfect timing. But more than their tactical skill, what terrified Zexhai was their attitude. They joked with each other while fighting for their lives. They showed concern for wounded Veltar soldiers even while shooting at others. They complimented their enemies on particularly clever moves. It was as if they saw warfare not as a matter of life and death, but as some kind of deadly game. "Watch the tall one," a human had called out to his teammates. "He is learning our patterns." "Good for him," another had replied while firing his weapon. About time. Someone around here showed some tactical sense. These were beings facing certain death, and they were giving advice to their enemies. The last human survivor had been a young female. Wounded and alone, surrounded by dozens of Veltar warriors, she had lowered her weapon and smiled. "You fought well," she had said to Zexhai in perfect Veltar language. "Your species has potential. I hope you learn from this." Then she had triggered a grenade that killed her instantly. Zexhai closed his eyes and tried to push away the memory. Even now, months later, he could not understand what he had witnessed. The human had spoken to them like a teacher addressing students. She had died hoping that her enemies would grow from the experience. "Commander Zexhai?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. He looked up to see a young Veltar female standing beside his shelter. She wore the simple clothes of a refugee, but her bearing suggested military training. Yes? My name is Sir Hai. I served under Captain Veltox in the Outer Rim. I heard you are writing about the humans. I am trying to, Zexhai admitted, though I am not sure anyone will believe it. Zexhai, may I tell you something I witnessed? Zexhai gestured for her to sit. Over the past months, he had interviewed hundreds of survivors. Their stories all contained the same impossible elements. Humans who fought beyond reason and treated their enemies with strange compassion. I was on a supply convoy when the humans attacked, Sir Hai began. Our escort was destroyed quickly. The cargo ships were defenseless. We expected to be killed or enslaved like our ancestors did to other species. But the human ships disabled our engines, then sent boarding parties. But they did not come to loot our cargo or take prisoners. They came to give us medical supplies and repair equipment. Zexhai frowned. That makes no sense. The human commander told us that civilian targets were not legitimate military objectives. They gave us enough supplies to reach the nearest Veltar station, then left. They said they hoped our people would choose a different path. Did they take anything? Yes. They took our military codes and star charts. But they left compensation, food, medicine, even entertainment materials for our children. Zexhai added this to his notes. The pattern was consistent across all reports. Humans destroyed military targets with ruthless efficiency, but they showed surprising mercy to non-combatants. Sir, there is something else, Sir Hai continued. I have heard that human ships are approaching the capital. Zexhai looked up sharply. An invasion? No, sir. The reports say they are flying diplomatic flags. That evening, Zexhai joined thousands of other Veltar who gathered to watch the human ships arrive. 3 vessels descended from orbit and landed at the main spaceport. They were clearly military craft, but their weapons were powered down and their shields lowered. A group of humans emerged from the lead ship. They wore formal uniforms instead of battle armor. At their head was a tall female with gray hair and calm eyes. People of Veltar, she announced in their language. I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation. We come not as conquerors, but as neighbors, the crowd murmured in confusion. Neighbors? After everything that had happened? Your species has learned something that took us centuries to understand, the Admiral continued. You have experienced fear. True fear. Not just caution or concern, but the deep terror of facing extinction. She paused and looked across the assembled refugees. For too long the Veltar have been the hunters. You have never known what it feels like to be prey. Now you do. And that knowledge can make you better. Admiral Chen gestured to her companions, who began distributing small devices to the crowd. We offer you membership in something called the United Nations. Not as subjects or servants, but as equals. Your military expertise, combined with your new understanding of mercy, could help us protect species that cannot protect themselves. An old Veltar commander stepped forward. Why should we trust you? You destroyed our empire. Because, Admiral Chen replied, we could have destroyed your species entirely. Every human ship carried weapons capable of sterilizing your worlds. We chose not to use them. She looked directly at Zexhai as she continued. Your people are not evil. You are simply young. You learned to be predators but never learned when to stop hunting. We offer you the chance to become protectors instead. Later that night, Zexhai returned to his memoir. But instead of writing about fear and defeat, he found himself writing about hope. Today, I learned the most important lesson of my life, he wrote. Humans do not fight to destroy their enemies. They fight to save them from themselves. They showed us what we were becoming, and they offered us the chance to become something better. My first encounter with fear came during combat with humanity, but my first encounter with hope came from the same source. Perhaps that is what makes humans truly dangerous. Not their weapons or their tactics, but their refusal to let their enemies remain enemies forever. Outside his shelter, human and Veltar voices could be heard working together to plan the future of both species. For the first time since the war began, Zexhai smiled. The nightmare was over. The real work was just beginning.